Welcome to Bladed Tech Musings, the channel dedicated to retro tech, innovation, science, and technological entertainment. Just 2 days before SpaceX's historic first commercial manned spaceflight, Virgin Orbit, the satellite launching subsidiary of commercial spacecraft company Virgin Galactic, attempted to fire the LauncherOne rocket into orbit from its Boeing 747 carrier aircraft just off the coast of Southern California. Unfortunately, the rocket broke up shortly after its release. The company has begun analyzing the data collected to see if it can determine the cause of the failure. The primary engineering difference between the failed launch and previous testing is that the engine ignition had to occur in flight. The launch comes just 2 months after Virgin Orbit's government contracting unit, VOX Space, won a 3-launch contract from the U.S. Space Force for $35 million. It was the Space Force's first significant launch award since its December inception, although it has been subsequently eclipsed by the Space Force's launch of its X-37B spaceplane, mission OTV-6, this May. The LauncherOne rocket is designed to lift up to 660 pounds of cargo to low Earth orbit. The vehicle is limited to microsat lift duty, unlike SpaceX's and the United Launch Alliance's rockets, which can lift 1 to 2 orders of magnitude more in freight depending on the orbit height required. A single Virgin Orbit dedicated launch is listed at $12 million, significantly less than the $50 to $100 million price of medium-duty rockets from competitors, but at a premium when you consider SpaceX offers shared launch pricing as low as $1 million per microsat. The competitive edge that Virgin Orbit offers is the ability to launch satellites without being tied to the launch schedule of a ground launch center. Virgin was careful to downplay expectations of the LauncherOne test spaceflight. It was hoped that the rocket would reach space, but there was little expectation that even in the best case, that it would reach the orbit required for commercial launches. Virgin gave a pre-launch odds of success to be at best 50%. The rocket contained a payload, but the company did not release details about it. If the rocket had reached the test orbit, it would have released the payload and recorded data, deorbiting shortly thereafter. If the mission had gone perfectly, the LauncherOne rocket would have refired its engine and tested its ability to move into a different orbit. This ability is an important selling point for multi-satellite missions. Former U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Kelly Latimer was the pilot of the 747 carrier aircraft. She also flies the White Knight II launcher aircraft used by Virgin Galactic to lift the Spaceship Two suborbital spacecraft to launch altitude. Latimer is officially one of the Spaceship Two pilots, although she was not one of the 5 pilots on board during the Spaceship Two's flights to near space. Virgin Orbit is the second company to design and fire towards orbit an aircraft launch rocket. The first was Hercules Aerospace, which launched its Pegasus rocket into orbit from a Boeing B-52 carrier aircraft in 1990. The Pegasus was launched a total of 44 times, last in October of 2019. That mission to lift the ICON scientific microsat cost NASA $56 million. The market for a light-duty rocket at that price is apparently a little thin, as there were no current orders for the Pegasus at the time of Virgin Orbit's launch. Hercules Aerospace is now part of Northrop Grumman. We cover the ICON launch in a bonus segment after the conclusion of the Virgin Orbit main story. New Zealand-American company Rocket Lab offers LOE launches for microsats at a cost of $5 to $6 million, about half of Virgin's per-launch price, although the company's payload limit for its Electron light-duty rocket to low Earth orbit is 495 pounds. Last month, Virgin Orbit conducted a dry run of its carrier plane launch pattern off of San Nicolas Island, California. The modified Boeing 747 went into a 25-degree climb in simulation of a launch of the LauncherOne rocket at 35,000 feet. In its operational launch, the LauncherOne separated from the carrier and subsequently lit its Newton 3 engine, producing the 74,000 pounds of thrust required to push the 70-foot, 30-ton rocket into eventual orbit. Virgin Orbit has a 7-launch manifest, including the 3 from the U.S. Space Force. The second launch is for NASA's ELENA 20 science microsat mission that will send 10 CubeSats into orbit. 3 more launches are planned, but not scheduled. 1 for GOM Space, 1 for Sky and Space Global, and 1 for Cloud Constellation. The U.S. Space Force is expected to use the first of its 3 rockets as a technology demonstrator. It is not clear when the first paying launch will occur, given that the rocket still requires a successful test flight. Broadband satellite internet provider OneWeb had ordered 39 launches from Virgin Orbit in 2015, but terminated all but 4 of them in 2018. Virgin Orbit owner Richard Branson was an original investor in OneWeb. Virgin sued OneWeb in 2019 for its termination fee, which OneWeb said it had already effectively paid as a result of the initial amounts remitted to the rocket manufacturer. The suit was in limbo after OneWeb filed for bankruptcy in March of 2020. We covered the OneWeb bankruptcy and its microsat constellation in episode 27. The link to episode 27 can be found below. OneWeb's remaining 4 Virgin launches do not have planned launch dates. The satellite company figures on launching the vast majority of its satellites on Soyuz rockets managed by Arianespace, assuming the company survived its Chapter 11 reorganization. Virgin Orbit's ambitions don't end with low Earth orbit insertions despite its short manifest. The company intends on offering interplanetary space probe missions in addition to low Earth orbit satellite missions. But it is clear that the company has quite a way to go before LauncherOne triggers interest from organizations that are currently limited to space probe launches organized at significant expense by state-led space agencies. What do you think of Virgin Galactic and Virgin Orbit and its impact on commercial space development? Does the failed spaceflight of LauncherOne invalidate their technology? Share with us by dropping a comment below. We hope you enjoyed this briefing on Virgin's first rocket spaceflight. If so, click that like button. Clicking the subscribe button and bell notification icon will also help you stay informed when new episodes are released. Links to previous space industry related episodes and our other content can be found below. Stay connected by occasionally checking our Instagram feed, where we post content from our upcoming episodes and from episodes past that you may have missed. Make sure you follow our Twitter account, where all new episodes are announced. And finally, join us on our Facebook page, where we cover current news and events related to channel content. Thanks for watching.
Hello everyone, I'm Jennifer Wolfinger, and thanks for joining us for this highly anticipated launch. The Ionospheric Connection Explorer, or ICON for short, will help scientists understand the physics of our space environment, as well as protect our communication satellites and astronauts while they're in orbit. The ICON mission is managed by NASA's Launch Services Program based here at Kennedy Space Center. What separates ICON from traditional rocket launches is that the Northrop Grumman Pegasus XL rocket will launch from the bottom of a Stargazer L-1011 airplane instead of a stationary launch pad. The Stargazer took off from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station about 45 minutes ago. You can see it there on your screen, with the Pegasus attached to its belly. This aircraft, the world's only operational air launching system, is a mobile launch platform that can be deployed from anywhere in the world. The plane will release the rocket 50 miles off the coast of Florida at approximately 9:30 this evening. This is the first of today's 2 possible drop attempts. What you're seeing now is a bird's eye view of Stargazer's flight path. The path follows a long oval loop, also known as the racetrack. When the plane reaches a certain point on the path, the Stargazer will drop the Pegasus rocket. If the first attempt is a no-go, Stargazer will loop back to the sweet spot and make a second attempt by 10:55 p.m., which is when the launch window closes. Now here are a few more quick facts about the mission. Once ICON is launched and reaches 40,000 feet, it will be released in free fall for 5 seconds before its first stage rocket motor ignites. The launch sequence from drop to payload separation will take about 11.5 minutes. The Pegasus XL is over 57 feet long and weighs nearly 53,000 pounds. ICON weighs nearly 650 pounds, about as much as a vending machine. When in orbit, the satellite will travel at more than 4 miles per second. That's almost 30 times faster than a commercial airliner. ICON will study changes in the ionosphere where Earth's weather meets space weather. The satellite solar array is over 8 feet long and 2 feet wide, a little bigger than a common door.
Take a look now at a video this past year. So for the past 11 months, we heard from our pre-launch broadcast a couple days ago that there were some major issues, not major issues, but just issues. We attempted to launch almost 11 months ago. Malcolm, what are we seeing happen here over the course of the past 11 months?
Well, this is footage of ICON being pre-launch checked. At this moment, they're buttoning up to fit inside the payload fairing. But over the past 11 months, we've also had some other activity going on. One is troubleshooting and resolving the issue that scrubbed us out 11 months ago. And the second team has been working on just caretaking of the rocket itself and the spacecraft.
Yeah, we had to fly it out to California. That's the facility where they can actually take the thing apart and really do what needs to be done. So this is them actually repacking the Pegasus on the L1011 to fly it back out here to the East Coast. It arrived a couple weeks ago. So we actually, I think we're going to go ahead and pass it back over to Jennifer in the studio and get a little bit more information from her about the science of ICON and the instruments on board. Jennifer?
Thanks, Joshua. While we wait for a launch update, let's learn a little bit more about the dynamic zone of our atmosphere that ICON will be studying.
So, Tom, why do we want to study the ionosphere?
Well, that's a good question. So, the ionosphere is the densest plasma in space between us and the sun. And that plasma has a number of effects on systems that we use every day.
So the coolest part that I like about this particular mission is that you got to have an understanding not only of the Earth's weather, but also space weather, because they're really kind of combining, in between the ionosphere. I mean, that must be really difficult or a challenge for you to kind of understand the ionosphere.
That's right. So space weather is a big topic, and when it stirs up the ionosphere, it's hard to maybe see other sources that are driving these changes in the ionosphere. But 95% of the time, space weather is pretty benign and quiet. We don't have a space hurricane every day. We do find that the conditions in the ionosphere are hard to predict anyway. We think that's probably because there's another mechanism driving the ionosphere, and we think it's the lower atmosphere, actually.
So when you have these storms coming towards the Earth, and you'll be able to make better predictions, let's say for GPS, for communication systems, because sometimes those will kind of get out of whack, or they actually can get damaged during a strong storm.
Well, there's three sort of effects, but some of the major effects are, like you said, are communications. Okay. Because the ionosphere can get stirred up and become very variable, and then we generally use it to bounce signals off of all the time for long-range communications, and that can be adversely affected. Then there's geopositioning, as you noted, so those users aren't bouncing signals off the ionosphere, they're trying to penetrate the ionosphere from GPS satellites. And those signals can become scrambled as well, and that can affect everyone from people who are trying to drive a combine with a GPS to airlines. And then the third users focused on space weather are power and utilities. So all those currents that the utilities are worried about are currents that are driven because there's current overhead in the ionosphere. So being able to predict that condition in the ionosphere is key for those power operators as well.
Now, when we're talking about the ionosphere, what kind of range are we talking about in the atmosphere?
So that's a good question. So in the daytime, the ionosphere is about 100 kilometers up, or 62 miles. That's where the plasma starts. And it goes all the way up to a big peak about 300 kilometers. The nighttime, the lower ionosphere sort of disappears, it recombines, the sun's not driving anymore, but the upper ionosphere just sits there. And that's what you use to bounce signals off of at nighttime.
So it's easier to communicate at night than it is during the daytime.
If you've listened to shortwave radio, you can get Radio Moscow or Radio Tehran in the middle of the night. You can't get that in the daytime.
You can't get it in the daytime. Now, Tom, as the principal investigator of this mission, what is your ultimate question that you want to answer?
What I want to understand is why the ionosphere is completely different one day to the next. And we've tried to model it. We don't have the measurements. You'd have to guess. And then maybe you're right or maybe you're wrong. Why is it doing that? So we've never had the data in the daytime and the complement of instruments at the same place at the same time to even approach that question.
Thank you, and hi everyone. We're here at the skid strip at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida, and I'm joined by Phil Joyce, Vice President of Space Launch with Northrop Grumman. Behind us is the Stargazer and the ICON spacecraft. It's an exciting time to be here. It is launch day, 2 years in the making. How are you feeling personally about that?
Well, there's really no day like launch day. Everybody is just jazzed for this mission. It's been 2 years of hard work. And a lot of trials to get to this point. The team couldn't be more excited and more confident that we're going to have a good mission today.
Let's talk a little bit about the trials. There were some problems that were encountered that you had to overcome during that time. Talk about them and how you fixed it.
Yeah, well, on some previous launch attempts, we observed some anomalous readings in one of our position feedback sensors on the rudder. The rudder is on the top of the vehicle and is what steers the Pegasus during its first stage of flight. They were concerning enough to us and to NASA that we stood down and we did a very long and detailed investigation on the cause of those, determined what that cause was, made corrective actions, implemented those, and that got us to where we are today, ready to launch.
And where we are is standing right in front of the spacecraft and the plane as well. And you can hear our audience, probably the hum of those generators in the background. They're playing a key role ever since it got here and all the way up until launch day. It helps protect the spacecraft. How does it do that?
Well, what you're looking at back there is our launch pad. The L1011 is a flying launch pad as well as the first stage of our rocket. And those generators are required to operate those L1011 systems like any normal commercial aircraft, but also to protect the spacecraft environment inside of the Pegasus fairing. This particular spacecraft, the ICON spacecraft, is very sensitive to contamination. And the systems that you hear in the background are providing a clean source of temperature-controlled air to that spacecraft so that we can ensure we have a great mission.
And I hear it's 65 degrees. I'd like some of that controlled air on me right now.
Yeah, it's a little warm out here.
It's a warm October day here in Florida. What are you looking most forward to, and where will you watch the launch?
Well, of course, we're always looking for a successful launch and a happy customer. That's what we're here for. I'll be in mission control with the rest of the Pegasus team, doing the countdown and being part of all of this.
Bill, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll send it back to you in the studio.
Where does Earth's atmosphere end and space begin? In a mysterious region of space, scientists call the ionosphere, a volatile place, where terrestrial weather from below meets space weather from above. It's also where our astronauts and critical space assets orbit. Without a proper understanding of this dynamic region in space, the technology and communication we rely so heavily upon could be at risk. That's why NASA is launching the Ionospheric Connection Explorer, or ICON, to give us answers.
The primary goal of the mission is to gain an understanding between the weather here in our atmosphere and in the ionosphere in space. We don't quite have a handle on what's going on up there in the ionosphere, so this will give us an opportunity to understand that.
The ICON spacecraft only weighs 364 pounds, so NASA's Launch Services Program chose Northrop Grumman's air-launched Pegasus rocket to deliver it into a 360-mile-high orbit.
We selected the Pegasus XL launch vehicle. It provided an excellent combination of mission performance and flexibility for the mission design for a spacecraft of the mass of ICON.
What's unique about the Pegasus rocket is that it is an air-launched vehicle, and that allows us to launch from anywhere in the world.
The challenge with processing Pegasus is that it's a flying solid rocket motor. Solid fuel ready to burn as soon as it's ignited.
PLT, LC is go for launch. PLT confirm.
PLT confirms go for launch.
LC, RTO, countdown net, liftoff, first motion time.
It requires special attention. An explosion-proof processing facility at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California, where the spacecraft must be mated to the rocket and sealed inside its protective fairing. It's one of the few launch systems in the world where the payload is attached to the launch vehicle before it's encapsulated. Once complete, Pegasus is free to launch from anywhere in the world.
Once we've established that we're ready, we then transport our entire launch team and hardware to another part of the world so that we can insert ourselves into the proper trajectory.
But to get there, Pegasus still needs to be strapped to the belly of the L1011 Stargazer. Strapping 55,000 pounds of solid rocket fuel to the bottom of an airplane is tricky, but these rocket scientists and engineers are up to the task. Once ICON and Pegasus are locked and loaded, then it's up to the pilots to fly the Stargazer into its drop zone.
LC, Senior MEFCO, countdown L1011 is in the box.
Heading and ground speed are green. LC Peg, Peg is go for launch.
LC is go for launch. PLT confirm. And drop on my mark. 3, 2,
1, drop. Pegasus away. Vehicle is fully armed. Stage 1 ignition has been confirmed.
Launching ICON to explore and unlock the mysteries of the weather where Earth meets space.
Through transonic. Power buses remain strong. Stage 1 fin actuator system is operating nominally and controlling the aerodynamic flight of the vehicle. Coming up on 30 seconds into the ICON mission. Stage 1 separation confirmed. Stage 2 ignition has been confirmed and attitude is nominal. Stage 2 TVC is operating as expected to control the flight of the vehicle.
All right, so there we go. What you're seeing right now is actually an infrared camera that's based here at the Kennedy Space Center, and it's been able to track that. We didn't show you this earlier because there were clouds in the way. So as the rocket flew up above the clouds, we were able to get a picture of it. So we could even see the payload fairing separate and come off. So it is a really, really pretty night out. It's nice and beautiful, hearing lots of nominal calls, which is what we want to hear. I want to talk a little bit about ICON now, because as Pegasus will round out its job soon, ICON really does become the star of the show. So a few things. It has about the size and mass of a home refrigerator. It's deployed to about 27-degree inclination at 360 miles in altitude. So that's a little bit higher than the space station as far as its altitude is concerned. And the inclination is especially noteworthy because a lot of these kinds of science missions will have polar orbits, will then move from north to south pole. This one is flying much more equatorially. And it's going to be traveling at over 4 miles a second when it reaches its orbit. That's one orbit every 97 minutes, so roughly 16 orbits every day. That's the same speed just about as flying from Los Angeles to New York in about 12 minutes. So this thing is moving very quickly. I'm very excited for this. Continuing to hear those calls for nominal action, which is what we want to hear. I want to go ahead and actually toss this to an overview of the ICON mission in general. So go ahead and take a look now about this, some more about the science of ICON.
Up past the clouds, past the stratosphere, and even farther, some 60 to 600 miles above Earth, our atmosphere slowly gives way to space. This region, the ionosphere, is home to the aurora, but is also increasingly a key part of the human domain. It houses not only astronauts, but radio signals used to guide airplanes and ships, and many satellites. And yet, the ionosphere is not well understood. To explore this area of near-Earth space, NASA and UC Berkeley built the Ionospheric Connection Explorer, or ICON. ICON's task is to help us understand just what causes the constant changes we see in the ionosphere. The more we understand, the more we can protect our assets in space. From a position close to Earth, ICON samples variations in the ionosphere over the course of hours, days, and seasons. The mission will investigate how the ionosphere reacts to our planet's weather rising up from below, as well as space weather from above. A key set of the mission's observations focus on the most eye-catching phenomena visible in the ionosphere: airglow, colorful bands of plasma caused by solar radiation. ICON will use specialized technology to track how this plasma is moving through the ionosphere. As ICON learns more about the relationship linking Earth's atmosphere and the space environment, the information will help improve the ability to predict conditions in the ionosphere. One more important step in protecting ourselves as we venture farther and farther from home.
There you go, some really great calls there. So we just heard that's the round out of the second stage finishing its job and the third stage beginning its task moving forward. It has a little over a minute to burn as the third stage. There again, a great nominal call on that. So everything proceeding well. We continue to hear great reports. The people here, you can feel the energy.
Operating nominally.
Everyone is really excited about this mission and having it on its way to where it needs to be.
vehicle attitude remains nominal.
What you're seeing on screen is an animation with some data there on the right-hand side, kind of just tracking where this thing is right now on its way to its orbit. A big year for some other things going on with Northrop Grumman and aerospace. The Pegasus, obviously, this is great. So what's the future look like?
Yeah, so along with Pegasus, Northrop Grumman is actively working ground operations at KSC for our Omega rocket that's under development. We're currently modifying the mobile launch platform, one of them, and the vertical assembly building High Bay 2. Preparing for our launch at LC-39B in 2021. And cool fact, we're actually the first commercial company to utilize the historic vehicle assembly building.
Yeah. All right. I'm now here with NASA launch manager Omar Baez. Omar, congrats.
Thank you.
Does this one feel special, or is this just like another great launch for Launch Services Program?
It's another great launch for the Launch Services Program, but an awesome and great one. This one's been a long time in coming. We had some setbacks early on, middle of last year, and I'm glad that we were able to get this payload up in orbit and in a safe condition. We did confirm separation through the spacecraft TDRS link. The orbits look fantastic, and currently they're power positive, so everything looks fantastic for us. And a wonderful Pegasus launch, and like always, when your launch pad is moving at 500-600 miles an hour, things happen, and this time the first attempt got us because we lost positive communication with the aircraft and the ground, and our rule is to abort the flight, go back around and try it again. And we did this once before during the HESI mission back in 2003, and were able to execute it flawlessly today.